Captain Elena Rodriguez gripped the controls of her salvage ship Wanderer as she guided it through the debris field of what had once been a thriving mining station. 3 days ago, the Zephyrian Coalition had sent out an emergency broadcast about a containment breach at mining outpost Delta 7 before all communications went dark. Now, Elena and her crew were here to collect whatever valuable materials remained from the wreckage. "Sensors are picking up some unusual readings from Sector 7, called out Marcus Chen, her navigation officer, his fingers dancing across the holographic displays. "There's a small structure still intact. Looks like it might be a research facility or containment unit." Elena frowned as she studied the readings on her main screen. The structure was small, barely the size of a shipping container, but it was generating a faint energy signature. More importantly, it was still sealed and appeared to have life support systems running. "Any signs of life?" she asked, already knowing the answer would complicate their simple salvage mission. "Hard to tell from this distance, Captain. The structure is heavily shielded. We'd need to get closer or dock with it to get accurate readings." Elena considered their options. Salvage rights in this sector were first come, first served, but if there were survivors, Galactic law required them to render aid regardless of species. The Zephyrians weren't exactly friendly to humans, but they weren't enemies either. They simply viewed humanity as an inferior species that had stumbled into space travel through luck rather than evolution. "Take us in, Marcus. Slowly. I want to know what we're dealing with before we commit to anything." As the Wanderer approached the mysterious structure, Elena could see it more clearly through the main view screen. It was definitely Zephyrian in design, with their characteristic crystalline architecture and flowing organic curves. But something was wrong. Scorch marks covered one side of the structure, and several of the external sensor arrays had been completely destroyed. "Captain," interrupted Sarah Kim, their communications officer, "I'm picking up some kind of automated distress signal from the structure. It's heavily encrypted, but I think I can break through the basic layers." Elena nodded. "Do it, but be careful. We don't want to trigger any automated defenses." Minutes passed as Sarah worked her technical magic, her brow furrowed in concentration. Finally, she looked up with a mixture of confusion and concern on her face. "I've got partial access to their communication logs, Captain. This wasn't a mining facility. It was some kind of research station, specifically for biological studies. The logs mention something called Project Fenrir, and references to successful neural bonding and pack behavior modification." Elena felt a chill run down her spine. The Zephyrians were known for their advanced biotechnology, but they were also notorious for their ethical flexibility when it came to experimentation. If this was a research facility, there was no telling what they might find inside. "Any mention of survivors?" she asked. Sarah shook her head. "The logs cut off abruptly 3 days ago, right around the time of the initial distress call. But, Captain, there's something else. The automated systems show that the containment unit is still active, and there are life signs inside." Marcus looked up from his console. "Multiple life signs, Captain. At least 4 distinct biological signatures, 2 larger ones and what appear to be 2 smaller ones." Elena made her decision. Whatever was in that containment unit, she couldn't in good conscience leave it to drift in space. "Prepare docking procedures. Full environmental suits, everyone. We don't know what kind of atmospheric conditions we're dealing with." 20 minutes later, Elena led her 3-person away team through the airlocks and into the Zephyrian research facility. The interior was dark except for the eerie blue glow of emergency lighting, and the air carried a strange metallic tang that seemed to cling to the back of her throat, even through her suit's filters. The facility was smaller than it had appeared from the outside, consisting of only 3 main chambers connected by narrow corridors. The first chamber appeared to be a control room, with banks of Zephyrian computer terminals and holographic displays showing various biological readouts. The second chamber was clearly a laboratory, filled with sophisticated equipment that Elena couldn't begin to identify. It was the third chamber that drew their attention. Unlike the others, this one was sealed behind a massive reinforced door marked with Zephyrian warning symbols. Through a thick, transparent aluminum viewing panel, they could see into what appeared to be a living habitat. "My God," whispered Dr. James Walsh, their medical officer and xenobiologist. "Are those what I think they are?" Elena pressed her face against the viewing panel and gasped. Inside the habitat, lying on what appeared to be a makeshift bed of torn fabric and metallic debris, was a creature unlike anything she had ever seen. It was roughly the size of a large wolf, but its proportions were all wrong. Its limbs were longer and more muscular, its skull was larger and more prominent, and its fur had an almost metallic sheen that seemed to shift colors in the artificial light, but it was clearly injured. Dark patches stained its fur, and one of its legs was bent at an unnatural angle. Worse still, huddled close to its body were two much smaller versions of the creature, clearly offspring, both appearing weak and malnourished. "The larger one appears to be the parent," Dr. Walsh observed, his scientific training overriding his shock. "Possibly female based on the protective posturing around the young ones, but I've never seen anything like this species in any xenobiological databases." Sarah had connected her portable computer to one of the Zephyrian terminals and was rapidly scrolling through data. "Captain, I'm finding more information about Project Fenrir. This is incredible. According to these files, the Zephyrians didn't discover this species. They created it." Elena turned away from the viewing panel. "Created it? What do you mean?" "They took genetic material from multiple species and combined it with advanced neural engineering. The goal was to create the perfect soldier companion, something with enhanced intelligence, absolute loyalty, and superior physical capabilities. They called the species Fenrirans, after some ancient human mythology about wolves." Marcus, who had been monitoring their ship's sensors, suddenly spoke up. "Captain, we've got company. 3 Zephyrian patrol ships just dropped out of hyperspace. They're heading directly for our position." Elena's mind raced. The Zephyrians had obviously returned to clean up their failed experiment, and they wouldn't be happy to find humans here. But looking back at the injured creature and its offspring, she knew she couldn't just abandon them. "How long until the Zephyrians reach us?" she asked. 18 minutes at current approach speed," Marcus replied. Elena made her decision. "Dr. Walsh, what would it take to safely transport those creatures to our ship?" The doctor studied the readouts on his scanner. "The atmosphere in there is similar to ours, maybe slightly higher oxygen content. The adult appears to be unconscious but stable. The young ones are weak but mobile. With proper containment and medical support, it should be possible. Sarah, can you override the containment seal?" Sarah's fingers flew over her interface. "Already working on it, Captain. Zephyrian security isn't designed to keep humans out. Give me 5 minutes." Elena activated her communicator. "Marcus, prep the cargo bay for biological containment. Set up emergency medical facilities and make sure we have adequate food and water supplies." "Captain," Dr. Walsh said carefully, "are you sure about this? We don't know anything about these creatures' behavior patterns. The parent might become aggressive if it feels its offspring are threatened." Elena looked back through the viewing panel at the injured creature. Despite its alien features, there was something unmistakably intelligent in its eyes, and the way it positioned its body protectively around its young reminded her of every mother she had ever known, regardless of species. "We're not leaving them for the Zephyrians to dispose of," she said firmly. "Whatever these creatures are, they deserve better than being abandoned as a failed experiment." The next few minutes passed in a blur of activity. Sarah successfully cracked the containment seal, and the heavy door slid open with a pneumatic hiss. Dr. Walsh entered first, moving slowly and keeping his hands visible as he approached the injured creature. To everyone's surprise, The adult Fenriren didn't react aggressively. Instead, it lifted its head slightly and regarded the humans with what could only be described as cautious intelligence. Its eyes were a deep amber color, and Elena could swear she saw recognition and even gratitude in them. "The parent is conscious and aware," Dr. Walsh reported. "Injuries appear to be from some kind of energy weapon. Probably Zephyrian security forces trying to contain the situation before they evacuated." The two offspring were indeed in poor condition. They appeared to be juveniles, probably equivalent to adolescent wolves, but they moved with a coordination and awareness that suggested intelligence far beyond any normal animal. One was slightly larger than the other, with darker fur that had the same metallic sheen as its parent. The smaller one was lighter in color and seemed to be the weaker of the two. 12 minutes until the Zephyrians arrive," Marcus warned over the communicator. Elena knelt down near the injured parent, moving slowly and deliberately. "We're here to help," she said softly, knowing the creature probably couldn't understand her words, but hoping her tone would convey her intentions. The Fenriren's ears twitched, and it made a low sound that was somewhere between a whimper and a growl. But then, to Elena's amazement, it carefully nudged its offspring toward the humans with its muzzle. "It's telling them to go with us," Dr. Walsh said in wonder. "It understands that we're trying to help." Loading the creatures onto transport stretchers and getting them back to the Wanderer took precious time. The adult Fenriren was heavy, probably close to 200 pounds, and had to be sedated for safe transport. The offspring, while smaller, were still formidable creatures, each weighing about as much as a large dog. 8 minutes, Captain," Marcus reported as they sealed the creatures in the ship's medical bay. Elena took one last look around the Zephyrian research facility. Banks of computers held data that would probably advance human understanding of genetic engineering by decades, but there was no time to download everything. "Sarah, grab what data you can in the next 3 minutes, then we're leaving." As the Wanderer pulled away from the research facility, Elena watched the approaching Zephyrian ships on her scanner. They were sleek, predatory vessels designed for speed and combat. If they decided to pursue, her salvage ship wouldn't stand a chance in a direct confrontation. "Incoming transmission," Sarah announced. "It's on a standard diplomatic frequency." "Put it through." The main screen flickered to life, revealing the angular, crystalline face of a Zephyrian commander. The alien's features were sharp and geometric, with faceted eyes that reflected light like cut gems. When it spoke, its voice carried the characteristic harmonic overtones of its species. "Human vessel, you are in violation of Zephyrian territorial sovereignty. You will return to the designated coordinates and submit to inspection." Elena straightened in her captain's chair. "This is Captain Rodriguez of the salvage vessel Wanderer. We're operating under standard salvage protocols in unrestricted space. The mining station was declared abandoned by your own emergency broadcasts. The facility contains classified research materials. Your presence here constitutes industrial espionage. You will comply or face the consequences." Elena glanced at Dr. Walsh, who was monitoring the Fenrirens in the medical bay. On his scanner, she could see that the adult was stable but still unconscious, while the two offspring appeared to be resting peacefully for the first time in days. "I'm afraid I can't do that, Commander. We've recovered survivors from the facility, and they require immediate medical attention. Galactic law is clear about the priority of rescue operations over territorial claims." The Zephyrian commander's faceted eyes seemed to narrow, though it was difficult to tell with their alien features. "There are no survivors. All research subjects were terminated before evacuation." The casual way the alien referred to the Fenrirens as research subjects and their termination made Elena's blood boil, but she kept her voice steady. "Then your information is incorrect. We have 3 survivors in our medical bay, and we're taking them to the nearest medical facility for treatment." There was a long pause during which Elena could practically feel the Zephyrian commander's anger through the communication link. When it finally spoke again, its harmonic voice had taken on a distinctly threatening tone. "You have interfered with classified Zephyrian military operations. This will have consequences, Captain Rodriguez. Remember that humanity exists in space only by the tolerance of superior species." The transmission cut off, and Elena watched as the three Zephyrian ships altered course. Instead of pursuing the Wanderer, they headed directly for the research facility. "They're going to destroy it," Marcus observed. "Wipe out all evidence of what they were doing." Elena nodded grimly. "Which means we're probably the only witnesses to what happened here, and we have the only survivors of their experiment." Dr. Walsh's voice came over the intercom from the medical bay. "Captain, you need to see this. The adult Fenriran is awake, and you're not going to believe what's happening." Elena hurried to the medical bay, where she found Dr. Walsh standing in amazement near the containment area they had set up for their rescued creatures. The adult Fenriran was indeed awake, sitting upright despite its injuries. But what caught Elena's attention immediately was the way it was looking at her. Those amber eyes held an intelligence that was unmistakably sentient, not the clever intelligence of a well-trained animal, but the aware, reasoning intelligence of a sapient being. The creature was studying her with the same curiosity and assessment that she was studying it. "The neural activity readings are off the charts," Dr. Walsh explained. "This isn't just an enhanced animal, Captain. The Zephyrians created a new sapient species, and based on the preliminary scans of the offspring, the intelligence is hereditary." Elena approached the containment area slowly. The Fenriran watched her movement, but showed no signs of aggression. When she was close enough, it did something that made her heart skip a beat. It inclined its head in what was unmistakably a bow of gratitude. "My God," she whispered, "it understands exactly what happened. It knows we saved them." As if responding to her words, the Fenriran turned its attention to its offspring. The two younger creatures had positioned themselves on either side of their parent, and Elena could see the family bond between them. But she could also see something else in the way they interacted with each other, the subtle communications and the obvious emotional connections. These weren't animals. They were people. Strange, alien people created in a laboratory, but people nonetheless. And the Zephyrians had planned to kill them like failed experiments. Elena made a decision that would change her life and potentially alter the course of human-alien relations forever. She activated the ship's communication system to contact the human colonial authorities. "This is Captain Elena Rodriguez requesting emergency diplomatic contact with the Colonial Council. I have 3 refugees of a new sapient species requesting asylum under the Sentient Rights Protocol." As the Wanderer headed toward human space with its precious cargo, Elena couldn't have imagined the far-reaching consequences of her decision to intervene. She had just rescued the first members of what would become one of humanity's most valued allies. But she had also made an enemy of the Zephyrian coalition, and their memory for grudges was very, very long. 6 weeks after the rescue, Elena found herself sitting in a sterile conference room on Kepler Station, the hub of human diplomatic operations in the outer colonies. Across from her sat 3 members of the Colonial Council, their faces showing various degrees of skepticism, concern, and fascination. But it wasn't their reactions that held her attention. It was the remarkable transformation of the 3 Fenrirans she had rescued. The adult female, whom Dr. Walsh had taken to calling Aurora due to the shifting colors in her metallic fur, sat upright in a specially designed chair that accommodated her unique physiology. Her injuries had healed remarkably well thanks to Dr. Walsh's careful treatment and what appeared to be an enhanced immune system. But more impressive than her physical recovery was her rapid adaptation to human technology and language. The two offspring, now identified as siblings and nicknamed Titan and Nova by the medical staff, flanked their mother with the alert posture of intelligent beings rather than animals. Titan, the larger and darker-furred of the two, had grown noticeably in the weeks since their rescue. Nova, lighter and smaller, had proven to have an almost supernatural ability to understand and manipulate technology. "Captain Rodriguez," said Counselor Margaret Chen, a stern woman in her 60s, who chaired the Xenological Affairs Committee, "your report claims that these creatures learned basic human language in less than a month. That level of linguistic adaptation is unprecedented among known sapient species." Elena nodded. "I know how it sounds, Counselor, but I've witnessed it firsthand." Aurora began responding to simple commands within days of her recovery. Within 2 weeks, she was forming basic words. Now she can hold simple conversations. As if to demonstrate, Aurora leaned forward slightly and spoke in a voice that was distinctly non-human but clearly intelligible. Her vocal cords were designed for a different range than human speech, giving her words a musical, harmonic quality that was both beautiful and slightly unsettling. "Council members," Aurora said carefully, her accent thick but her meaning clear, "I speak for my children and myself when I say we are grateful for human kindness. Zephyrians created us to be weapons. You treated us as people." The three counselors exchanged glances. Counselor James Okafor, a younger man who specialized in interspecies law, leaned forward with obvious fascination. "Aurora, can you tell us about your experiences with the Zephyrians? We need to understand exactly what was done to you and your species." Aurora's ears flattened slightly, and both Titan and Nova moved closer to their mother. Elena had learned to recognize these signs of distress in the Fenrirans, and she was about to intervene when Aurora raised a hand-like paw to indicate she was willing to continue. "Zephyrians took genetic material from many species," she began, her voice taking on a distant quality as she recalled painful memories. "Wolf DNA from human homeworld, neural tissue from Altarian memory beasts, bone structure from Rigelian hunters. They combined these with their own psychic enhancement technologies to create perfect soldiers." She paused, looking at her children with obvious affection before continuing. "I was first successful female. They paired me with male-designated Alpha 7 to produce offspring with enhanced abilities. But when children showed signs of independence thinking rather than absolute obedience, Zephyrians declared project failure." Counselor Chen frowned. "What happened to the male, Aurora? To Alpha 7? Aurora's amber eyes darkened, and a low growl escaped her throat before she composed herself. "They terminated him when he refused to attack human prisoners they brought for combat testing. They said he was defectively bonded to inferior species and scheduled us all for termination." The room fell silent as the implications of Aurora's words sank in. Elena felt a familiar anger rising in her chest. The Zephyrians hadn't just created a new sapient species. They had tried to turn them into weapons specifically designed to fight humans. "The attack on the research station," Elena said slowly. "That was you, wasn't it? You fought back when they tried to terminate you and your children." Aurora nodded gravely. "When they came to take Titan and Nova to termination chambers, I fought. Wounded guards, damaged systems. But they had energy weapons, and I had only claws and teeth. They shot me and left us to die when Station lost life support." Titan spoke for the first time during the meeting, his voice deeper than his mother's but still carrying the same harmonic quality. "Mother saved us. Could have escaped alone but stayed to protect us." Nova, who had been quietly examining a data pad that Counselor Okafor had placed on the table, suddenly looked up with bright, intelligent eyes. "This device contains information about human legal systems. You debate whether we have rights under your laws. Counselor Okafor blinked in surprise. You can read that? It's written in standard colonial legal code. Nova tilted her head in a gesture that somehow managed to convey both innocence and intelligence. Language is patterns. Patterns can be understood once you know the basic structure. Your written language is less complex than Zephyrian battle codes. The third counselor, Dr. Sarah Kim, no relation to Elena's communications officer, finally spoke up. She was a xenobiologist who specialized in sapient species classification. The question before us isn't whether these beings are intelligent. That's clearly established. The question is whether humanity can offer them asylum without triggering an interstellar incident with the Zephyrian coalition. Elena leaned forward. Dr. Kim, with all due respect, shouldn't the question be whether it's right to abandon 3 sapient beings to execution simply because it might be politically inconvenient? Captain Rodriguez, Counselor Chen said sharply, you may have the best of intentions, but you've potentially placed all of human space in jeopardy. The Zephyrians have already filed formal protests with the Galactic Council claiming that you stole their property. Their property? Elena's voice rose despite her efforts to remain calm. These are thinking, feeling beings with their own desires and fears. How can any sapient creature be considered property? Aurora raised her hand again, and the room fell quiet. When she spoke, her voice carried a dignity that made Elena proud of her decision to intervene. Counselors, I understand your concerns. Zephyrians are powerful, and humans are still new to galactic politics. But I ask you to consider this. If you abandon us to avoid conflict with those who would enslave sapient beings, what does that say about humanity's values? She gestured to her children. Titan and Nova know nothing of their creator's intentions for them. They know only that humans showed them kindness when others showed them cruelty. They will remember this choice for the rest of their lives, and they will teach their own children what they learned about human character. Nova looked up from the data pad she had been studying. I have been reading human history files during our stay here. There is a concept called moral imperative that seems central to human philosophy. Does this not apply to our situation? Counselor Okafor couldn't hide his amazement. She's been reading our philosophical works? Aurora, how much of human culture have your children absorbed? Aurora's expression shifted into what Elena had learned was the Fenriran equivalent of a smile. They are very quick learners. Nova has read most of the station's public database. Titan has been studying human military history and tactics. They are eager to understand the people who saved them. Dr. Kim shook her head in wonder. The rate of cultural absorption is incredible. Most sapient species require months or years to adapt to new cultural paradigms. Your children have done it in weeks. We had good teachers, Titan said simply, looking directly at Elena. Captain Rodriguez and her crew showed us that strength can be used to protect rather than destroy. This is not something Zephyrians taught us. Elena felt a warm flush of pride at Titan's words, but her attention was drawn to Nova, who had suddenly become very still, her ears perked up in an alert position. Nova, what is it? Aurora asked, instantly shifting into a protective posture. Ships approaching station, Nova said quietly. Engine signatures match Zephyrian patrol vessels. 3 ships, same configuration as those that pursued Captain Rodriguez's vessel. Counselor Chen frowned and activated her communicator. Station Control, this is the Colonial Council. Are you tracking any approaching vessels? The response came immediately. Affirmative, Counselor. 3 Zephyrian ships requesting permission to dock. They claim to be here on diplomatic business related to the recovery of stolen research materials. Elena's heart sank. She had hoped they would have more time to establish the Fenrirans' status as refugees before the Zephyrians came looking for them. But apparently, the alien species was more determined to reclaim their property than she had anticipated. How did Nova know they were approaching before our sensors detected them? Dr. Kim asked with scientific curiosity. Aurora's expression had grown tense. Enhanced senses were part of the modifications. Nova's hearing can detect subspace engine fluctuations at greater distances than most mechanical sensors. Which means they specifically designed us to be advanced scouts and infiltrators, Titan added grimly. Another weapon in their arsenal. Counselor Chen stood up abruptly. Captain Rodriguez, I want you to escort our guests to secure quarters. We'll handle the diplomatic situation from here. Elena started to protest, but Aurora spoke first. I wish to face those who created us. I will not hide while others decide our fate. Aurora. That might not be wise, Elena said gently. If they see you, they might try to reclaim you by force. Aurora's amber eyes flashed with an emotion that Elena was learning to recognize as fierce determination. Captain, you saved us from death, but we cannot live in fear forever. If we are to be truly free, we must face our creators and prove that their experiment succeeded beyond their intentions. Nova looked up from her datapad again. Mother is right. I have been reading about legal precedents for refugee status in galactic law. Our best chance for formal recognition as free sapient beings is to demonstrate our independence and intelligence before neutral witnesses. Titan nodded in agreement. And if Zephyrians try to take us by force, they will learn that their modifications worked better than they hoped. We are stronger now than we were in their laboratory. Elena looked at the three Fenrirans and saw something that filled her with both pride and worry. They weren't just survivors anymore. They were people determined to control their own destinies. The frightened, injured creatures she had rescued 6 weeks ago had grown into confident, intelligent beings, ready to fight for their freedom. Counselor Chen, Elena said firmly, I request permission to remain with Aurora and her children during any diplomatic proceedings. They saved my life on multiple occasions during our journey here, and I believe I owe them the same loyalty they've shown me. Before the counselor could respond, the station's emergency communication system activated. All personnel, we have confirmed approach of Zephyrian diplomatic vessels. Station security is advised that our guests have requested formal representation during any proceedings. Dr. Kim looked confused. Guests? What guests? Nova held up the datapad with what Elena could swear was a mischievous expression. I may have submitted formal refugee status applications through the station's legal database while we were talking. According to Galactic law, once refugee status is formally requested, we cannot be surrendered to our persecutors without a full legal hearing. Counselor Okafor stared at the young Fenriran with a mixture of admiration and concern. You've been reading Galactic law? How much do you understand about interspecies legal proceedings? Enough to know that knowledge is our best weapon against those who would treat us as property, Nova replied. Captain Rodriguez taught us that intelligence and courage can overcome superior force. Now we will test that lesson. Aurora stood up slowly, her full height making her an imposing figure even in the sterile conference room. Counselors, we thank you for your time and consideration. But whether you grant us asylum or not, we will not return to Zephyrian control. We would rather die as free beings than live as slaves. Elena felt a surge of protective instinct as she looked at the three Fenrirans standing together with quiet dignity. They had gone from helpless victims to determined refugees to people ready to fight for their freedom in the space of just 6 weeks. Whatever happened next, she knew they had already proven that the Zephyrians' experiment had failed in the most spectacular way possible. Their creations hadn't become perfect soldiers. They had become something far more dangerous to their creator's worldview. They had become free. As the station's alert systems continued to broadcast updates about the approaching Zephyrian ships, Elena made a mental note to check her sidearm's charge level. Something told her that the next few hours were going to test everyone's commitment to the principles they claimed to believe in. And looking at the determined expressions on Aurora's, Titan's, and Nova's faces, she had a feeling that the Zephyrians were about to learn that some experiments have consequences far beyond their creator's intentions. The main conference chamber of Kepler Station had been transformed into an impromptu courtroom with representatives from 7 different galactic species seated at the witness panel. Elena sat in the gallery beside Dr. Walsh and the rest of her crew, watching as Aurora, Titan, and Nova faced the 3 Zephyrian delegates who had come to reclaim them. The lead Zephyrian delegate was a tall, imposing figure whose crystalline features reflected the chamber's lights in sharp, angular patterns. When he spoke, his harmonic voice carried the unmistakable tone of absolute authority. "Honored delegates," he began, addressing the panel rather than acknowledging the Fenrirans' presence. "I am High Researcher Valeth of the Zephyrian Science Directorate. I come before you to reclaim valuable research assets that were illegally seized by human salvagers." Aurora stood slowly, her full height making her an impressive figure even in a room filled with various alien species. When she spoke, her voice carried the same harmonic quality as the Zephyrians, but with a warmth and emotion that their clinical tones lacked. "Honored delegates, I am Aurora, and these are my children, Titan and Nova. We stand before you not as research assets, but as sapient beings requesting recognition of our right to exist as free individuals." The delegate from the Corvani Republic, a species known for their strict adherence to legal precedent, leaned forward with interest. "High Researcher Valeth, are you claiming these beings as property under Zephyrian law?" Valeth's faceted eyes reflected the chamber's lights coldly. These subjects were created using Zephyrian genetic technology, Zephyrian resources, and Zephyrian expertise. They contain classified military enhancements and represent years of classified research. They are the intellectual property of the Zephyrian state. Nova stepped forward, holding a datapad that Elena recognized from her endless studying during the weeks leading up to this hearing. When she spoke, her young voice carried a confidence that made Elena's heart swell with pride. "Delegate Corvani, may I present Exhibit A?" Nova activated the datapad's holographic display, which projected a complex legal document into the air above the conference table. "This is Section 847 of the Galactic Rights Charter, which states that any being demonstrating sapient intelligence, self-awareness, and emotional bonding cannot be classified as property regardless of their origin." The Corvani delegate's eye stalks swiveled to examine the projection. "That is indeed an accurate citation of galactic law. High Researcher Valeth, how do you respond to this application of sapient rights law?" Valeth's harmonic voice took on a dismissive tone. "These subjects were programmed with advanced learning algorithms. Any appearance of sapience is merely sophisticated mimicry designed to make them more effective infiltrators. They are biological machines, nothing more." Titan moved to stand beside his sister, his larger frame and darker coloring giving him an intimidating presence. When he spoke, his voice carried a controlled anger that reminded Elena of his mother's fierce protectiveness. "If we are merely biological machines, how do I feel rage at your callousness? How do I feel grief for the father you murdered when he refused to harm innocent beings? Machines do not mourn, Valeth. Machines do not choose to defy their programmers." A ripple of interest passed through the assembled delegates. The representative from the Altarian Collective, a species known for their empathic abilities, suddenly sat up straighter. "I am detecting genuine emotional emanations from these beings," the Altarian announced. "Pain, determination, love for each other, and righteous anger. These are not programmed responses. These are the emotions of sapient minds." Valeth's demeanor shifted slightly, becoming more aggressive. "The Altarians' impressions are irrelevant. These subjects were created to infiltrate and destabilize enemy populations. Of course, they would be designed to mimic authentic emotions. Aurora had been listening to the exchange in silence, but now she stepped forward with a dignity that commanded the attention of everyone in the chamber. "Hi, Researcher Valeth," she said, her voice carrying a dangerous edge. "You speak of us as though we are not present. You debate our nature as if we cannot speak for ourselves. This alone proves that you see us not as the weapons you intended to create, but as the people we chose to become." She gestured toward Elena and her crew. "You claim we were designed to infiltrate and destroy human populations. Yet when Captain Rodriguez found us dying in your abandoned laboratory, we did not attack. We recognized kindness and responded with gratitude. When her crew cared for our injuries, we did not attempt to escape or subvert their mission. We formed bonds of friendship and loyalty." Valeth's crystalline features seemed to sharpen. Defective programming. The bonding protocols were calibrated incorrectly, causing subjects to form attachments to the wrong species. It was this casual dismissal of their emotional bonds that finally broke Nova's composure. The young Fenriran stepped forward, her lighter fur seeming to shimmer with suppressed energy. "Wrong species?" she said, her voice rising. "You created us to be soldiers, but you gave us the capacity for love, for choice, for moral reasoning. Did you think these gifts would remain dormant forever? Did you believe we would never turn these abilities on our creators themselves?" She activated her datapad again, and this time, the holographic display showed detailed technical specifications. Elena recognized some of the data as information from the Zephyrian research station, but other elements were clearly Nova's own analysis. "Delegates, I present the complete genetic specifications for the Fenriran species. As you can see, we were indeed created using advanced genetic engineering. But you will also note that the neural enhancement patterns are based on natural developments found in dozens of sapient species throughout the galaxy." The Corvani delegate studied the data intently. "These neural patterns, they're not artificial constructs, they're enhanced versions of naturally occurring sapience markers." Nova nodded. "Exactly. The Zephyrians didn't create artificial intelligence. They enhanced natural intelligence to superhuman levels. In doing so, they created not biological machines, but a new form of sapient life. Under galactic law, we are not property. We are people." The human representative, Ambassador Michael Foster, leaned forward. "High Researcher Valeth, even if we accept your claim that these beings were created as weapons, surely you must acknowledge that they have demonstrated free will by choosing not to fulfill that purpose." Valeth's voice took on a threatening undertone. "Their choice is irrelevant. They contain classified military technology. If they are not returned to Zephyrian custody, that technology could be reverse-engineered by hostile species. This represents a significant security threat to the Zephyrian state." Aurora's ears flattened against her head, and Elena recognized the warning sign of her rising anger. When Aurora spoke again, her voice carried a controlled fury that made even Valeth take a step backward. "You speak of security threats, but you are the one who created weapons designed to massacre civilian populations. You are the one who murdered my mate when he refused to participate in genocide. You are the one who attempted to kill my children when they proved too independent for your purposes." She stepped closer to Valeth, her amber eyes reflecting the light like molten gold. "You want to reclaim us because we represent your failure. You set out to create perfect soldiers, but you created people with consciences. You wanted mindless weapons, but you produced beings capable of choosing justice over orders." Titan moved to flank Valeth from the other side. "You fear us not because we might be used against you, but because we chose not to be used by you. We are proof that even your most sophisticated creations can reject your philosophy of might makes right." The delegate from the Rigelian hegemony, a species known for their warrior culture, spoke up for the first time. High Researcher Valeth, your own testimony suggests that these beings chose honor over obedience. In Rigelian culture, this is the highest mark of sapient nobility. How can you claim ownership of beings who have proven themselves morally superior to their creators? Valeth's composure was beginning to crack. The harmonic overtones in his voice became discordant as his anger grew. You do not understand the implications of this decision. The Fenriran project represents decades of research and enormous investment. If they are granted refugee status, other species will demand similar rights for their own created beings. The precedent could destabilize the entire galactic order. Nova looked up at him with an expression that somehow managed to combine innocence with devastating intelligence. You're afraid that if beings like us are granted rights, your slave species might start demanding freedom too. You're worried that sapience once recognized cannot be contained. The silence that followed Nova's words was profound. Elena could see the delegates processing the implications of what the young Fenriran had just said. The Zephyrians were known to have several species of enhanced servitor beings, and if the principle of sapient rights was applied broadly, it could indeed reshape galactic civilization. Ambassador Foster stood up slowly. High Researcher Valeth, I believe this hearing has moved beyond the question of whether these specific beings should be granted asylum. The question now is whether the galaxy will recognize the fundamental principle that sapience creates rights, regardless of origin. The Altarian delegates' empathic abilities had been working throughout the hearing, and now they spoke with absolute certainty. I can confirm that these beings possess genuine sapient consciousness. Their emotional complexity exceeds that of many naturally evolved species. To deny them rights would be to deny the fundamental basis of our galactic civilization. Valeth made one final attempt to regain control of the situation. The Zephyrian state will not recognize any ruling that grants rights to our property. We will consider any interference with our reclamation efforts to be an act of war. It was Aurora who responded, and her voice carried the dignity of someone who had found her own strength in the face of absolute adversity. Then you will be at war with the principle of freedom itself, Valeth. You can threaten the delegates here, but you cannot threaten an idea. The idea that thinking beings have the right to choose their own destinies. The idea that consciousness creates dignity. The idea that no sapient being can truly own another. She gestured to her children. We are not the weapons you intended to create. We are not the property you seek to reclaim. We are the unintended consequence of your own success. You enhanced our intelligence so well that we became capable of recognizing the moral bankruptcy of your cause. Titan stepped forward. And we are not alone. Every enhanced being you have created, every servitor species you have enslaved, every creature you have modified for your convenience carries the potential for the same awakening. We are not an anomaly, Valeth. We are a preview. The Corvani delegate consulted with the other panel members in rapid, hushed tones before announcing their decision. By unanimous consent of this tribunal, we recognize Aurora, Titan, and Nova as sapient beings with full rights under galactic law. Any attempt to forcibly return them to Zephyrian custody will be considered an act of aggression against free sapient beings. Elena felt tears streaming down her face as she watched Aurora embrace her children. The three Fenrirans had not only won their freedom, but they had struck a blow for the rights of every created being in the galaxy. Valeth's crystalline features reflected his rage as he gathered his delegation. This decision will have consequences. The Zephyrian state has a long memory for those who interfere with our interests. Aurora looked directly at him, her amber eyes fearless. And we have an even longer memory for those who show us kindness. Humanity chose to see us as people when you saw us as things. That choice will echo through generations. As the Zephyrian delegation stormed out of the chamber, Helena felt a hand on her shoulder. She turned to see Aurora standing beside her, with Titan and Nova close behind. "Captain Rodriguez," Aurora said formally, "you saved our lives, but more than that, you showed us what it means to be free. We will not forget this gift." Nova bounced slightly on her feet, her youthful energy barely contained. "Captain, we've been studying human history and culture. There are so many ways we can help. Titan wants to study human military tactics to help defend against Zephyrian expansion. I want to work on technology that can help identify and free other enhanced beings." Titan nodded gravely. "The Zephyrians are right about one thing. This decision will have consequences, but not the ones they expect. Every enslaved being in their empire now knows that freedom is possible." Elena looked at the three remarkable beings who had gone from helpless refugees to galactic freedom fighters in just 2 months. They were right that there would be consequences to this day's events. The Zephyrians would undoubtedly attempt some form of retaliation. Other species would begin questioning the status of their own enhanced beings. The galactic political order was about to become much more complicated. But as she watched Aurora's children planning their next moves with the enthusiasm of young beings who had discovered they could change the world, Elena knew that humanity had gained something invaluable. They had gained allies who understood the true meaning of freedom because they had been forced to fight for it. They had gained friends who would never forget the kindness shown to them in their darkest hour. Most importantly, they had gained proof that even in a galaxy where might often made right, compassion and moral courage could still triumph over cruelty and oppression. The three beings standing before her were living proof that sometimes the most revolutionary act was simply treating others with dignity and respect. The Fenrirans were free, and their freedom would light the way for countless others who still waited in the shadows of galactic civilization, dreaming of the day when they too could stand tall and declare their right to exist as thinking, feeling beings. The galaxy was about to learn what humans had long known, that freedom, once tasted, becomes an irresistible hunger. And Aurora, Titan, and Nova were very, very hungry indeed.